Hello and welcome back to our Nature Friendly Farming podcast, where we're going to talk farming with those who are working on the ground. I'm the Northern Ireland manager for the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and we are a farmer-led organisation who work with farmers to support them find the balance between farming and nature. We do that through having a series of knowledge exchange events, having great conversations like we're having today, and through trying to move policy in a way that supports nature-friendly farming and a more resilient farming future. Thanks to Danske Bank for hosting us here in the building today and for supporting our series of knowledge exchange through this summer. So keep an eye out on our website and our socials for upcoming events, and it's free to join the Nature Friendly Farming Network, so strongly advised in it. I'm here with Bronagh and Jonnie Blair. It's good to have you. I've had the pleasure of working with for this pair for the last few years. Bronagh's the Nature Friendly Farming Network Vice Chair, and she works with the Grow Innovation Network and organises Feels Good, Northern Ireland's Regenerative Farming Festival. So she's a big advocate for nature friendly farming and all things regen, it's safe to say. You're a suckler farmer with a sheep enterprise outside Cookstown. Jonnie, suckler herd up outside Limavady. And I'll let you guys explain a bit more about that. Maybe start with you, Jonnie. Can you tell me a bit about your farming background and what's led you to farm the way you do?
Yeah, so I suppose we farm quite differently now compared to what we did even 4, 5, 6 years ago. As with everything now in the world, you talk about pre-COVID times. And I suppose pre-COVID to me was relatively high input, trying to chase high stocking rate, trying to chase production in order to make money out of the suckler job. But I sort of found that wasn't really working, and financially certainly it was really hard, and we were just running faster to stand still. In some ways we were going backwards. So I sort of thought, well, surely there has to be a better way to do it than this. So it slowly sort of morphed and took us into this whole world of low input, tall grass grazing, completely paradigm shift, away from, shall we say, conventional thinking. And first and foremost, it was a financial decision, and it has proven to be a better financial decision than what was previous. And then off the back of that, then you get all sorts of different benefits with your biodiversity increase and grazing longer into the end of the season and the start of the season, getting them out earlier. And yeah, it's just, I'm not saying it's all rainbows and sunshine. There is obviously issues with it, but there is definitely scope to do well with it.
Yeah, it's working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And what, just in terms of those changes, how quickly did you see a positive change, and what was the first positive change that you seen?
You weren't getting rid of all your money trying to buy stuff to make stuff happen. And you were figuring out that actually, nature has an awful lot of this sussed, and oftentimes it's a matter of us getting out of the road and actually trying to figure out how these systems naturally are meant to be designed and how they're meant to work, as opposed to us trying to force our will upon them in order to try and squeeze a profit out the other end. And then, in the back of that, then it's huge paradigm shifts, huge mindset shifts. You're actually starting to grow grass without fertiliser, which for any young farmer going through Greenmount or anywhere, you're just not told that that's possible. You're very much down the line of you must do X in order to get Y. Mm-hmm. And then you're seeing biodiversity coming back, which when I started this, I wasn't massively bothered by it, to be honest with you. It wasn't on my radar. But whenever you start to see it increasing and coming back, you actually sit down, you actually watch it, and you realise that's pretty damn cool. And it doesn't take an awful lot for nature to find a home at the end of the day. And the sort of the old classic, build it and they will come, and it does happen. It takes time, but it does happen.
Yeah, and I can see as you're talking about that, it's maybe bringing, and I've talked to you in the past about this, of like the job satisfaction that kind of comes with that territory. Yeah. Bronagh, can you relate to that yourself, or give us a bit of paint the picture of how you came to farming as well, maybe from the start, because I know coming from an engineering background and bringing that now into your interest in soil health and getting right into that. So paint us a bit of picture of where you're coming from and your ethos too.
So I didn't grow up with farming with my dad in the same way most people do, so I didn't have that kind of years of seeing a certain system. And I don't think then that I maybe had to have that paradigm shift in a way. And I just ended up coming back home. That wasn't planned, but there's too many. It's too long a story to get into. But I used to be in the Air Force as an aircraft mechanic, and I was always the type of person that asked questions. To the point that it was even written on one of my assessments in the Air Force. Bronagh needs to stop asking questions and remember she's in the military. It was just who I am. Like, why are we doing that? Couldn't that be different? And so when I came home, it wasn't even to take over the farm. Dad has Parkinson's, and I was working with my brother, and I could see that first year I came home, he sold a lot of stock, and he gave up one of his out farms, and then he asked me to cover for him to go on holidays, and a cow died, and he still asked me to cover another holiday. So it was 2 months, and that 2 months on my own was when I started kind of just really falling in love with it and decided I think I'll give this a go. I can't even fully describe exactly what really, really clicked. I think there was a romanticism of, like, my dad had built everything there from just a couple of fields. It was all he inherited, and I think there was a bit of a feeling of somebody has to keep this going. And just that love of being outdoors and with animals, and not having a clue what I was really letting myself in for at all. I just kind of started like that. But I ended up on this more journey of soil health because Dad did say, you know, we have bad soil and that's going to be your biggest challenge. And I do remember the first year working with him in July, there was a couple of weeks of rain, and sure enough, everything had to come back into the sheds. And I just thought, this is ridiculous, because you had to make sure you always had that little bit of spare food for them, and sheds were ready. And I just knew that wasn't ideal. And they took a lot of work, and there was a lot of management, and I kind of felt, you know, I don't know if I really have that in me either. So I from the beginning, I was already trying to think, how do I make this easier? Because this is really hard work. And you don't grow up with it. You kind of do look at things a bit differently.
Yeah, you can have those fresh ideas. And how was that, bringing the fresh ideas, you know, to a family farm, and the dynamic with that? Did you find it was easy and smooth, or was there a bit of sort of button heads for a while, or were you invited to come and add your sort of creative mind to the situation?
Well, probably looking back, Dad probably just was like, what is she talking about now? And he's quite a quiet person. He doesn't say too much. So he didn't, the fertiliser probably was the only thing he really put his foot down with. He was just like, you just cannot grow grass without fertiliser. I was like, well, I'm reading these books and there's all this stuff. And he was just like, no, you just can't, don't be doing that. And yet I remember the day we had that discussion, I pointed at the hedge and was like, but look at all of that. I don't understand, you're not putting fertiliser over there. And even then I didn't fully understand why that was happening, but I could see it. And I think naturally maybe I did have good observational skills. And then probably, like, my brothers both live away, Dublin and Australia, but I call them a lot for advice, especially things like, where's the tap that turns off the main water, or where's this at, because Dad can't remember. But they were really good and supportive, and probably their biggest concern was me changing the breeds, because one of my brothers in particular had spent a lot of investment in bringing on purebred Charlies into the farm. And then it probably took a couple of years before he was like, yeah, okay, you can sell them all off if you want, just go on ahead.
Succession is probably one of the biggest things, like, in farming to get round, because it's not like any other business in that way, that you're moving into like the same house, and you're, you know, it's all the emotional attachment of the relationships like that are there. How have you found that, Jonnie, in terms of taking on the farm and coming in with new ideas and going against fertiliser as often?
I suppose in some ways I'm fairly fortunate to have a dad who was quite happy to let me try stuff. I'm not saying that he agreed with it all, not saying that he enjoyed watching me do it all, but like, I think the whole idea of growing grass without fertiliser, I think for any farmer is huge, because that is so ingrained. That is just what you do. You know, the amount of times that I've had people on the farm and say, you're going into a nice field of grass and you're saying, how much slurry do you put in that? Oh, nothing. How much fertiliser do you put in that? I haven't seen a tractor since it was sown. You must be doing something. Yeah. It's like, well, no, I'm not doing anything. So,
tell us a bit more about that then, for somebody who's listening who doesn't understand and is thinking those thoughts. Tell us why your field's producing more grass then.
I suppose, well, it's a massive topic to condense into 5 minutes. But I suppose a very, very basic way of looking at it is if you look at fertiliser like a drug, and your soil can become a junkie very easy, because that soil then becomes reliant upon that fertiliser. And all the biology that lives naturally in a good, healthy soil is no longer required, or is adversely affected by the synthetic inputs, whether that's sprays, whether that's fertilisers or whatever, dewormers, anything like that. And if those guys aren't there, there's nothing naturally in the soil to feed the plants naturally how they're meant to feed. So whenever you start throwing fertiliser around, you get a hit. There's absolutely no argument about that. It definitely grows grass, but you pay for it. I mean, it's not a cheap, free thing. But whenever you step back and you try and sort of look at it from the way that nature has been designed, it has clearly been designed to function and to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm. What's underneath our feet is the new frontier in terms of science and getting an understanding of that soil. I know you're well into that, Bronagh, so that leads me on to wanting to hear a bit more maybe about your vermiculture and what that means, and your understanding of soil health and what you've been doing at your place to try and improve it.
Getting into the vermiculture, running a worm farm at the beginning was because I wanted that microbial diversity to put out into my land to try and fast forward the system. But really, as I went forward, I could see some changes that were happening. But I knew that, like Jonnie says, everything is just so complex and interconnected. To me, it was air, and my soil was my restricting factor. It's classified as surface water clay, so I'm always going to have an issue with water and drainage. So as much as I could be trying to bring microbial life to the land, if I didn't have air in that soil, it was never going to last. So I realised then, okay, this is a cheap system, and it's still me going out and doing something. So then I just sort of really pulled back from that, and the worm farm became more of a side hustle of creating something that I could use to coat seeds and for gardening and things like that. So I haven't put it on the land last year. I'm just working more on the grazing side of it for soil health and the plants. And like Jonnie says about the fertiliser, I realised that in my system, when I dug a hole, I had maybe 2-3 inches, usually around a perfect 3-inch layer of roots. But yet I did have probably 6 inches of topsoil. And then for me that was the click for fertiliser, that if I'm feeding from above, these roots don't have to go deeper. But this is also where my water is really sitting. And then you go down further and it was like bone dry. And I took Dad around and made him look at all of that on all of the fields. And even he stood there scratching his head, could not understand. We're standing here and water is actually pulling back out. Now we're standing in a puddle. Look down there, it's bone dry. So for me, I had to just think I need a bit more patience. My soil type might take even longer to get there, but
the swings of that then is your soil type may have more nutrients in it than light soil, and it may take more time, but the flip side of that is it could potentially be better.
That's what I'm hoping. So when Dad used to always say, like, someone with sandy soil does a great farm there. It's good because he could see they could keep cattle out longer, and they were draining way better. But I learned, I think it was from Nicole Masters, if you take a sandy soil or a clay soil, and if you take the surface area that soil colloid has to hold nutrients, and I think it was like a teaspoon or a tablespoonful of it, the sandy soil all spread out would be like a kitchen table, and the clay soil would be a football field of the capacity of what it can hold.
So you mentioned there, Bronagh, about just focusing on the cow and focusing on the grazing. Can you just, for somebody who's maybe wondering what you're saying there, or explaining how that grazing management for soil health works for you?
So I went to Greenmount to study. Started off at level 2, did level 3, and then did my foundation degree. And the whole way through, the grazing is taught around that sort of 21 days. And you can go back in when you have the third leaf growth there and eat it all off, get your maximum efficiency out of it. But I thought that was exactly the problem I was having with shallow roots and poor drainage. So for me, I was trying to let that grass grow a bit longer and give it time to put down deeper roots and go searching for nutrients and break up the soil a bit. I remember that first time I was moving the fence, and Dad didn't know what I was doing. So he came out one day and seen what I was leaving behind me, and he was pretty cross that day too. He doesn't normally, I'm making him sound like he's really not like that at all. But yeah.
I've met him, he's lovely.
He's a really quiet man. But yeah, those kind of things, it was so ingrained in them, like at maximum efficiency out of your grass. But it took me a long time I actually still don't think I have figured it out, of how paddock sizes and how, come back in 30 days, 40 days, 50 days, things like that. I think you just got to start doing it and then just watch it every year, what's sort of happening. And so it's very difficult sometimes, I find, for me, how much grazing I have ahead of me. But the most important thing for me is to see that I give it enough rest, that I get deeper roots, and that is definitely happening. You can see now that thatch is growing out and roots are going deeper. But getting a good variety of grasses and herbs and
did you do some resowing for that, like purpose?
I did a full reseed in one field, and then other fields I've just been broadcasting it or putting it out with a slurry at that time. And a lot of the time now you just see different ones come up themselves, because I think that's another switch that happens with fertiliser. The clover was the first thing to come back, and that was within 1 year it was already starting to come up. That I hadn't sown it, and then Dad had said he hadn't seen it in years, and that fertiliser was holding that plant back. And it just shows how intelligent the soil is at going, right, well, I'm not getting the synthetic nitrogen now, so I've got to figure out making my own. So that latent seed bed was there, and then it sends a signal and off it goes.
Yeah, I can see that even in our wee couple of fields at home. They haven't been reseeded for who knows how long, and there's tons of clover in it. You can just see it throughout. So interesting seeing that. And did you find much difference between full reseeding and that stitching it in, or spreading it with the slurry? Or if someone was thinking about trying to dip their toes into this sort of thing, would you have a recommended technique? Or
one field I did with slurry, and it was 2 years later, nearly. It was something like 18
and that's the seeds mixed into the slurry?
Yeah, before I started seeing some of those come up. So I think it was just that field was telling me it wasn't ready to put up chicory or red clover yet. But it wasn't, it just came up everywhere. It still only came up in areas. So it's not magic, it is patience, and it doesn't happen as uniform as whenever we do it with management.
Yeah, it's that ever human want for simplification and instant results, isn't it?
Reduction is the killer of human ingenuity.
Yeah, it can be, as you say, that complexity is the thing to lean into, but it's also not very comfortable.
It's incredibly uncomfortable.
Because you're going outside of your own beliefs of it's possible and what can happen. I mean, what you're saying there, Bronagh. Rest and recovery is the biggest tool we have in the toolbox. Personally, that I believe, and it doesn't matter what sort of grazing you do, but if you build in rest and recovery to your systems, that's whenever you start getting good things happening, and getting that diversity back in the paddock often means looking at things you maybe wouldn't want to have there. That's a mind shift change. Like one at the minute I'm fascinated by is dandelions. And I mean, if you actually look into what a dandelion is, it's a fantastic plant. It's been used for years as home medicine, as replacements for all sorts of things in the home. Not only from an animal point of view. I mean, you can eat dandelions leaves like salad leaves.
Yeah.
But we look at them and think, well, I didn't put them there. Why are they there? They shouldn't be there.
I think I'm getting a picture of what you are talking about, of allowing that observation and allowing that change, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but allowing that change. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but allowing that change and maybe 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 allowing that allowing a bit of the unknown to see what the sort of natural systems show you in the long run. But I guess coming back to that one for the instant results and a yearly income, I think, quite frankly, how do you find that? How do you find that patience, and how do you walk that tightrope between thinking, oh, if I keep, say, if I leave those docks, the whole field of docks, so the soil will be great in X amount of years, but this year I need to make money and I need to have enough grass to feed my cattle. So how's that? Do the worlds collide, or do you find you're fixated on your end goal, or what does that mean to you? That's for both of you. I'll let you start, Bronagh.
I think that's been really hard. Every year, well, I've lost 3. Dad gave up one out farm at the beginning when I just came on. Following year, gave up another one. Couple of years, I had the 3rd one, and then I lost it. So I think it's been really hard for me to keep working towards that balance, because the land kept changing. So it was the money was always going to be changing with that, and the stock amount was changing. But there's definitely, to put in that rest and recovery, I had to destock, and that's the hard part, to figure out your cash flow and everything, and then, so how long is this going to happen? And whereas at least I understand when farmers have the inputs, they kind of know, well, I usually make this much silage for this much kilos of fertiliser. So it is. It's a journey. Just sit back and enjoy the ride.
And you enjoy it? I guess that's the question. Yeah, do you enjoy the journey?
Because I am inquisitive like that, and then I think I like an experiment and see, the tweaks. And like you were saying earlier about when you build it and they just come. When I started going out and moving electric fences with the cattle on their paddocks, and the swallows, you'd go out, walk out there, not a bird in sight. As soon as you move that fence and they moved, it's magic, isn't it? And when you do start seeing those things, there's a proper feel-good factor.
And it's not just sort of a aloof, sort of airy-fairy thing. You understand that whenever you see those things, that there is more life. Yeah. Because if there was no worms, if there was nothing for them boys to eat, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So it is sort of a confirmation.
You're going in the right direction.
You're sort of, even if you're crawling on your hands and knees, you're going in the right direction,
But then they're my fly control now. So there's no pour on sheep. Don't do any on cattle in the summer. And those swallows just can keep that under control for me. But yet, I can still see that part of when I would go back in and say to Dad, oh my God, do you see how many swallows right there the day? How are they making you money?
Yeah, 100%.
All I can say is, well, they're kind of the fly control and they're part of that system. And, I think that's where I would have liked to see more government subsidies and helping us go through that sort of destocking. Because the ultimate gain, isn't it, what we're hearing from everybody else, is that when you get through this, you'll grow more biomass. So you'll have a much higher stocking density than the average person down the line.
I suppose a counter-argument to that would be, why should we support somebody for destocking and taking revenue out of the country? That would be what the classic comeback would be. And I can understand that to a point, but I suppose where I see the financial benefit on the farm is the fact that cash flow has become an awful lot easier. It's not because I'm selling more often or I'm selling more. Currently we're down with TB and have been for quite a long time, so that even constricts your cash flow even more to only maybe a few times in the year. And if you're grass fed, as we are, typically you're only killing animals towards the latter end of this sort of the summer and into the autumn. So you're very, very much directed all your money coming in at the one time, especially then with your subsidies coming in at that same time. So you have to manage the vast majority of the year without an income. But my cash flow is a lot easier because I'm not constantly spiking it with having to buy fertiliser, buy a load of meal every couple of weeks or every month. You're not sort of going, oh, my bank balance is just doing this the whole time, down to a point where then it goes spikes whenever you sell things. So actually I find cash flow a lot easier to manage because there's not just as much going out. And big bills to us now are like 2-3 grand. Whereas before you'd have been looking at a lorry load of fertiliser at 20 grand. And you'd be like, how am I going to pay for this? All right, we'll just push things further, get more beef out the gate.
Yeah, and you never know what it's going to cost next time.
Well, that's it, and you never, like, I mean, it only takes a small increase in the price of concentrate mill to make finishing an on-go. I mean, we're running through at the present time the best beef price that has ever been, that I can remember anyway. And you're still constantly hearing from beef finishers how it's so hard. It's even the margin's even tighter now. So it just shows you, like, the inputs versus the outputs are so disconnected. And I would say, if anybody is thinking of going down this route, it's very important to understand the context of where you are and where you want to go and how you're going to get there. Because if you go out and go cold turkey and stop fertiliser on day one, stop feeding your cattle meal on day one, you're in for a rough time. You know, because you have to understand that your land is used to fertiliser. It doesn't know anything else. You have to understand that your cattle are a certain phenotype, certain breed, that they've grown with meal, so they will not finish without meal. So you have to change that. You know, there's an awful lot of things you have to tweak and change to do this. But I would say it's worth it in the end. But it's a brilliant challenge.
Yeah. So how would you start doing that?
I suppose the classic, anybody that tells you to, on especially, let's say, fertiliser use, incrementally bring it down. So from, say, you're at 100% of what your fertiliser is, on year one. Year two, go to maybe 50 or 75%. Year three, drop it another quarter. Year four, maybe a tickle. Year five, you're starting to think, because over that time you're giving the soil room to manoeuvre and change and transition, and you're getting from constantly just getting fed to only being fed at certain times of the year and having to figure it out for itself, you know, the rest of the time. And I certainly found that, like, you know, there was a bit of a sort of like that there, sort of a curve, shall we say, in a graph of yield. Whenever I went down this route, because I started off in a couple of fields, just thought, oh, bugger, I'll just not bother. And the other ones I just thought, I'll tweak it off. And you could definitely see the ground needs time. It needs time to react, it needs time to adjust. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it's a weaning process.
It is a weeding process, most definitely.
Interesting to hear it from you straight, though, that you did try out the different ways in different fields, so you can really vouch for that.
And don't do them both at the same time. Like I started sort of weaning off fert before I weaned off concentrate, because I'd say in our modern genetics, concentrate's actually harder to wean off.
Yeah.
Because the modern genetics just are built around feeding.
Yeah, performance.
And performance. Even now, like TMRs and things like that there, you know, everything's very precision and precise. Nutrition is, you know, to the nth degree. Whereas if you're expecting something to go off and just finish off grass, dandelions and docks, that's a completely different nutrient profile, and you have to have that animal that can do that, and they exist. They're just typically not here. You know, so that is a learning curve as well.
You think you're getting that animal in your herd now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't fed concentrate now since 2023, and we're finishing off grass, and we're getting sort of your O plus, sorry, not O plus, 2 plus and 3 minus to 3 plus fat range. So I'm
On the R's still?
O's and R's.
Whenever we that shouldn't be a bad thing.
No, it's not, because whenever we fed concentrates, we were mostly R's with a few O's.
Aye.
It's switched around now, so it's mostly O's with a few R's.
Yeah.
But I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
And like I freezer some of the beef, and you look at a pack of sirloin steaks, you don't know if it was a U grade, an E grade, an R grade, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it all comes down to your taste, your tenderness, the quality of the marbling, the quality of the meat. You know, the grade makes no difference to that.
So Johnny, you explained a bit about how you've got your cattle to where you want to be and thriving on grass. And Bronagh, can you tell us a bit? You said you snuck in the Angus bull, was it? And you know, what about your breed since then, and how, and your herd, and how have you been getting them to go the direction you want?
I think that was the best thing that I did. That was game changing. Just not only just obviously the easy calving and stuff, but it did enable me to start getting to a point where cattle will go out and eat anything in the field. But when I learned about epigenetics, that you can change the expression of the genes by their environment, whether, you know, they're under stress or what their diet is and things like that. So what I did was the first grazing, when the calves went out to grass, the very first grazing, I would find the worst grass. And it's usually, you know, you want to put them on the best so the cow's milk keeps going and, you know, the calf thrives. So I put them on a field of like rushes and long crappier grasses and things. And yeah, and I had them paddocked and all, so the cows were just like, what is this? I'm restricted, this is terrible. And they roared a lot. And fertility did drop. So like I did stress the cows out with that. But obviously the calves were running around, didn't know any different. And that was, I think that was 22 or 23. But it was really good to be able to see who to start weaning out of the system, who was really proper, like...
Who couldn't handle it?
Aye, and who was taking maybe the fourth cycle before they settled down enough to come and calve. And then last year, again, I did it again. It was an awful field, and I remember the neighbour farmer coming out and saying, you shouldn't be putting your, you know, calves in there. That is just shocking. That's just like standing hay. And I have photographs of it. But the cows were all fat and full, never were roaring or crying out. And then when I sold my calves at the end of the year, I did worked out what their daily live weight gains was, and I had an average growth of 1.5 kilos. I had one heifer that grew 1.6 kilos a day. And I was, you know, it was a good year for sunshine, and that's brilliant. Definitely played a part. But for me, it really showed that it took a while to get there, but you can influence the epigenetics of the herd. And that was 0 meal in the diet by that stage. And usually the only time I bring meal in is if when I'm 6 months of housing and it gets to that very end, and I previously wouldn't have been selling calves until the end of housing, until they were nearly a year old. So that probably that month before they went for sale was when I brought meal in. It was just a long time on silage and just to give them a wee push before, and that was the only time I did it. But that meal is the drug for me. When you describe fertiliser as the drug, people come into my yard and say, very quiet cattle. You know, they're used to people being around. And I said, no, it's because they're not getting any meal. So when they see people, they don't start roaring.
In anticipation.
Yeah, that's so nice. That's like, I hated feeding meal for that reason.
Yeah.
They just got really unsettled. They would trample over each other to get it, and it was like a drug to them.
Yeah, it's probably bringing a bit of stress to a situation that could be avoided there too, yeah. Interesting. Well, I would love to talk all day on the soil health and getting right into it, but unfortunately we don't have endless time, but and I do want to cover some more subjects with you. So, Bronagh, could you tell us a bit more maybe about your advocacy for farmers? I know you're great at, you talk about you finding your tribe with the Nature Friendly Farming Network and with Grow In, and now Feels Good. So tell us a bit about Feels Good and why people should give that a go this year.
Well, Feels Good came about because we just felt that there was a lot of guys like Jonnie that were trying something different, and they were looking further afield for info and knowledge. We didn't have a lot of NGO networks here working with farmers like there would be across the rest of the UK. We thought, well, let's create a space that's not like a conference. It's just not in a stuffy hotel room. We just create a good vibe and put on all this information that we're talking about, you know, longer grass grazing and giving rest and recovery and changing your breeds and things like this, and pulling back on your inputs. And we just wanted a space for farmers to share those stories, maybe some scientists, some educators in this space, and to try and step away from the info, that knowledge transfer that usually happens here. It sort of comes from just one direction here, and it's really quite prescriptive, and it's quite a one size fits all, isn't it, kind of advice, and that's not really reality. And farmers will always listen to other farmers, and, you know, and they need to hear the stories of somebody else's successes and failures to give them the confidence to adapt.
And they need that honesty, or they'll not believe it too. Farmers are the first to spot a few lies or a story that's not telling the whole picture, aren't they?
And the failures are important to talk about. Quite often I find in any movement, all you hear about is the good things. You never hear about the things that go wrong. And you need to hear about that. You need to know about that, because if you don't know about that, then whenever they do come across your path, you'll think, is this am I the only one this has happened to? You know, is it me that's doing this? Or, you know, there's many things that will go wrong. as in any farming system.
That just shows you the importance of networks, and bringing farmers together to be able to speak openly and honestly without a sort of external narrative being pushed on them there. So Jonnie, it was a great day we had last year at your place, seeing the agroforestry that you've implemented, and I wanted to ask you about that and hear a bit more as to why you went down that line, how you did it, and maybe what you would advise someone to if they were thinking about it.
So I suppose agroforestry is quite an interesting topic because it's it can be very unknown to what it actually is. Quite often, if you ever hear of it in the press, that people think of agroforestry, think it's like literally planting a field of trees and forgetting about it. And that's not what it is. Agroforestry is the blending of trees and farming to try and complement each other. And I suppose, like, I come from a background where I have a very strong Christian faith, and I believe there is a design set in nature. I believe everything works for a reason and to a purpose. And I think what you need to do is you need to take a step back and think what this land was even only a few hundred years ago, or even 1,000 or so years ago. It was very much a treed landscape, and there's a reason for that. Is because we get a lot of the weather that suits trees, and we have a lot of soil that suits it. And you can almost say, and I've heard other people say about this as well, like you've got certain parts of ground that just cry out for trees. You know, there's a need for them. And that fungal sort of connection between trees and soil is a very big thing. We're talking about roots earlier. I mean, it's the ultimate tap root, trying to open up the soil, get it more porous, get that water working itself down. So we have fields there that are predominantly rushes and Yorkshire fog, brilliant stuff, and have real issues with water retention or percolation. So the idea is that the trees are going to go into that landscape and actually produce more grass. In the long term for me. I'm not putting them into trees and forgetting about the field and thinking, oh, that's a lost cause, why do you need to be there? You know, it's pointless. The trees are actually going to benefit the grass in the long run. And I do see certain things of that, you know, certain benefits coming already, even with them in a year or two. And we were talking about the subsoiler earlier. I mean, the tree is going to be my perennial subsoiler. Is the view of that, you know, it's without me having to drag iron through the ground, the tree is going to do that for me.
And it's probably worth saying that was the Woodland Trust helped you out.
Yes, it was. I should say that the Woodland Trust are very helpful with my first tranche. I've done some this year of my own bat, but the Woodland Trust did a lot of work with me last year for providing of trees and protection and a bit of fencing and things like that.
And supporting the planting plan and making it. And what I noticed when I was at your farm is just the sheer flexibility that was put into the plan. You know, no one field was done the same way. It was all thought out practically. How can this work for your farming system?
Yes, it was done on a field by field basis. It wasn't just a sort of as you were talking about earlier, like a prescriptive treatment. It wasn't just right, you do this and that's it. You know, you have to think about each field individually. You have to think about cattle flow, ins and outs, gates. Everything has to come into play. And it can be quite daunting when you first sit down and think about it. But once you get over that mind shift, it's you can sort of break down the barriers and do it again and experiment and try some other things.
I think we could talk about trees in the farming landscape as a whole other episode, maybe. Brilliant. But I wanted to ask you, Bronagh, could you give a bit of advice for someone, you know, as a self-proclaimed soil nerd, if someone doesn't know about soil health and they wanted to venture into that, start thinking about their soil health a bit more, what would be the first step for them?
Buy a spade.
Buy a spade. Brilliant.
And dig a hole.
And use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still something it really surprises me. People have been farming all their lives, have never dug a hole.
Yeah, I never looked
The
at
day
it.
Dad told me we have bad soil, I went out and dug a hole. I was like, well, all right, then what does that look like? And I didn't really even know what good soil looked like, but I had to see.
Yeah, you can't manage what you don't measure, you know.
Yeah. So and that you'll know when you start looking at it. That'll be instinctive. Look at your roots, like we're talking about, and look and see what kind of little bugs and wormies are in there, and smell it.
Yeah.
Look where the water is sitting on it.
Get in about it.
Yeah.
Try and be
when it's not
observational
right.
about everything on the farm.
Yeah. Like there's big things, deal with your pH and, you know, big obvious things. But definitely without people like Jonnie being that early adopter and trying these things and then opening his farm to honestly share, and you're always very honest with everyone.
It's brave, you know.
Makes the best cookies.
Yeah. There was good burgers. There was good burgers last year too. The agroforestry, I must say.
was a good deal.
Yeah. No, it is, and props to you both for that. You know, because if everybody just wants to show off when something goes right, and keep the gates closed otherwise, and not talk to anybody, then nobody's going to learn. And we all agree fully that farmers, and we see it, farmers learn from other farmers. They're the people that they want to learn from. As you say, that top down sort of knowledge transfer isn't what people are after. We want that knowledge exchange and that ecosystem of sharing and curiosity, and I think that's what the NFFN and growing and Feels Good and Farming for Nature in the south and all the things that we strive to do. And it is really, we're getting a bit of a critical mass with that, and it's exciting. It's exciting.
Do it's important though to have diversity in that group, and this is a real cheesy link to soil health. We talk about diversity of plants and how it really benefits soil health, but it's the same in those groups. Everybody can't be an extreme evangelist, hippie, tree-hugging farmer, because there wouldn't be as much challenge in there. You need the diversity in the group of the small to the larger scale intensive guys to keep bringing the variety of questions and challenges to it all.
Because you can get caught up in your own, it's like you can get caught up in your own sort of, what is the term? Siloed. You can get siloed in your own sort of thinking very easy. And it's true for any aspect of life. And you can just sort of think, well, I'm doing it right, or I'm doing it wrong. Everybody else is wrong. Yeah. And you learn from everybody. Yeah. There's not one person you can't come across in life and think I can learn something, even if it's just making a cup of tea better.
That's perfect. I think that's actually a good one to wrap up on, because it just really highlights the openness that we want to see. And I want to thank you both for coming and talking to us today about it, and just to say thanks to Danske Bank for hosting us, and to anybody. Well, you're welcome to come and join the network and come and challenge any of us, and we love a bit of discussion and healthy debate. So everybody get yourselves signed up to the NFFN, keep an eye out on growing, and get yourselves to Feel Good this year. Thanks to Danske Bank for hosting us, and looking forward to our next podcast coming out next month.